Welcome to Saturdays in Stitches. I am Angela Worth, owner of Mended Hearts Quilting and Boutique in Ellsworth, Iowa.
And I'm Erin. I'm the sales manager here at Mended Hearts Quilting and Boutique. And we are back to talk to you today about starting to sew.
Yeah, so last time we talked to you about cutting. So this time we're going to just jump in and briefly go over basic. The thread you want to use for your seams, the needles, how to find your 1/4 inch on your sewing machine. Anything I'm forgetting?
And we'll show you a few notions and tools that we have that we've used and continue to use that might help you get your consistent 1/4 inch seam a little bit easier.
So we're starting very basic, and then we will get more in depth as we go about all the different needles, all the different threads. But we wanted to start off just very basic to get started. So,
and it surprises me working out on the sales floor how many people don't know there's more than one needle or there's more than one size, same as thread. So we will show you what you need today to get started so you can get sewing, but then we will deep dive into it down the road.
yeah, absolutely.
So,
All right.
yeah.
Should we go to the sewing machine?
Okay, let's go. Okay, today we're going to talk about finding your 1/4 inch seam. Your 1/4 inch seam is very important in quilting because you want to keep it consistent so everything comes together in the end. This is the sewing machine seam guide. It has many different holes for different sizes. Today we're going to focus on the 1/4 inch, which will be the top one up here. So I'm going to just slide this under my presser foot, and then you put your needle down in the 1/4 inch hole, and this is going to tell me where to have my fabric to sew on to get my 1/4 inch. Then I'm going to take this, I like this diagonal seam tape to make a mark so that I can remember where to have my fabric to do my 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to set that down, tear some off, and that's going to create a guide for me. And then you will just put your needle up and remove your seam guide. Now when I set my fabric on here, I know that I should have a consistent 1/4 inch. So I'm going to show you how to put 3 strips together, and that's how we're going to verify the 1/4 inch. So we are just going to sew down these 3 strips. Now I can take these strips to the pressing board, press them open, and then we will come back and measure the middle and show you our 1/4 inch seam. But so far it's looking very good. Okay, so I have taken 3 2-inch wide strips of fabric and sewn them together with the 1/4 inch that I found on my machine with the diagonal seam tape as my guide. So now I know that this middle piece should be 1.5 inches because a 2-inch strip minus a 1/4 inch on each side will be 1.5 inches. So then I can lay my ruler down, 1.5 inches here, and a straight line here. And I know that when I go to sew my quilt with this 1/4 inch seam, my seam should be consistent with that, and I should line everything up and it'll be good. That's one way to verify your 1/4 inch seam. So again, we have lots of different tools and notions you can use. This is the diagonal seam tape that I was using earlier, and it is a very lightweight, kind of like a washi tape, and it'll come right off of your machine. We also have these vinyl sewing edge strips. So these have a little more of a lip on them, so your fabric doesn't slide around as much. It hits that lip and stops. Sewing machine guide that I used with the 1/4 inch on there, and it also has different measurements. So it has a 1/4 inch, 3/8, half, 5/8, and 3/4. So a lot of times, especially in bag making or clothing, you'll be needing a 1/2 inch or a 5/8 inch seam, and this tool will help you find that. We also have the perfect piecing seam guide, which just has a hole for the 1/4 inch seam. But it is a very nice way to check your accuracy and to get your 1/4 inch. All right, so here at Mended Hearts Quilting, we are a Janome and Necky dealer. So here are some of the 1/4 inch feet that Janome offers. There are more of them out here. Here's just a few of the most common ones. We have a 1/4 inch foot without a guide. So it doesn't have this little black lip there. You just line your fabric up to the edge of your foot. We have your 1/4 inch seam foot with a guide, which is this one. And most of the Janomes and Neckys come with this foot. And Janome also makes the Clearview quilting foot, so it has different guides that you can use for a 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch. You can put it in the middle to do your stitch in the ditch quilting. Lots of options with the Clearview quilting foot. Okay, so now we want to talk to you a little bit about needles. And again, we're just kind of touching on what you need to get started sewing, to get your 1/4 inch, and to get your project going. There are many, many shapes, sizes, and different types of needles. But for piecing a quilt, if you have a Janome machine, I like to use my blue tip needles. They're a size 11. Perfect for piecing, going through your fabrics. I use them for paper piecing as well. And I just love this needle. It's a universal, my go-to everyday sewing needle. We also use a lot of Schmetz needles. If you don't have a Janome brand machine, you can also use Schmetz. So I prefer the chrome needles. The chrome universal needles are more heat resistant and wear resistant. So they give you less stitch distortion. Chrome allows the needle to penetrate through the fabric with less resistance. These are universal, size 12. I prefer an 11 or 12 when piecing. So these universal ones will have a slightly rounded point to sew through your woven and knit fabrics. Universal needles are very popular. However, you can also use the Microtex, which is also known as a sharp. Now the difference is this is also a chrome, but the difference is this one has a very slim, tiny point at the end, so it goes really fast and sharp through your fabric. So this is very good for top stitching and nice straight lines. So Microtex Chrome Sharp Needle is perfect for piecing. So we've talked about some tools to give you a guide, to give you an edge to sew on with your fabric, 1/4 inch feet to help you keep consistent, your needles, what needles to use, and now we want to talk about thread. So Aurifil 100% cotton thread, we're using 100% cotton fabric, so it just makes sense to use 100% cotton thread. Aurifil is our go-to thread. We use 50 weight for piecing, so 50 weight is kind of your universal everyday thread. You can't go wrong with 50 weight. One of the nice things about Aurifil, it has your color number on here, so no matter what weight of thread it is, the color is going to be the same throughout. And let me show you a nice little tip here to start your thread. This is a brand new spool. You just twist off the end, and then you should be able to find where your thread starts. Now this one's a little funky, so I'm gonna just wrap that back up in there. But now I have my thread. So no cutting, no tweezing, no digging in there. It's just twist off the end and you're ready to go. Now this end can go on either side. So sometimes if my machine is breaking thread or giving me trouble, I'll flip it to see if that makes a difference. It's mostly when the spool is about done. So yes, so either side. And this is 50 weight also, but in a smaller spool. So if you want to give it a try and just want to try out the small spools or get a large variety of colors, this is a great way to do it. This one, the ends don't come off, but you should be able to find the starting piece very easily. I've never had trouble finding my start with the Aurifil. It's just knowing what to look for and to pull this end off is the big thing. But we don't want you to cut into your Aurifil and be disappointed because you can't find the end. So that's just a little reminder of how to get there. Okay, well, I think that's all we have to talk about for this part. So meet us back at the table with our drinks and we will go over everything.
Okay, so we are back. Hopefully we gave you some good tips and tricks there when you were sewing. I think there was just a couple things that we wanted to point out in addition to what we showed you. One of the things being, I just wanted to be clear on needle size because you talked about the blue tip being a size 11 and then you talked about the chrome, the two needles. What was the difference between them? The chrome
one's
sharp
and one's a universal.
Yes. Okay. So you did talk about that, but I just wanted to reiterate that we use either a size 11 or a size 12 because I didn't hear where you had said size 12 on these.
Oh, I think I did.
Okay.
Well, we'll have to go back and look.
Just in case, I might have missed it, but in case you missed it when it was said as well, either a size 11 or a size 12 for your basic sewing. And then do you want to talk about not curving off?
Yeah, and we'll touch on this more too, but
just to start off, like right from the start, we want you to have a really nice seam. And so that's the things that we want to point out.
So a lot of times when I am doing my 1/4 inch, and this one looks pretty good. So you'll start up here and then you go down your strip and by the end you like either get in too far or out too far from your 1/4 inch. So it is important at the end of your sewing strip that you are paying attention to where your fabric is on your sewing machine and you run that 1/4 inch all the way down through the end. Because a lot of times I will drop that 1/4 inch and end up with a wonky business down here. And then when you go to press it, it's like weird and you gotta fix it.
The biggest thing is and we've all done it, and so that's why I wanted to make sure that we point it out, especially if you're a beginner. When you go to join your seams together, when you go to nest those seams, they are not going to nest correctly if you have curved off. So I think we get really excited as we're sewing our 1/4 inch and we come down to the end, and then for some reason as we're going, we just curve off a bit. And when you curve off a bit, the majority of time, that's within that 1/4 inch that you're going to need when you butt your two seams together. So that's why it's so important. And if you have been piecing and you are having trouble nesting your seams and getting your squares to line up at those joints, that could be your problem. So just check to make sure you have a full 1/4 inch all the way down that seam that you have just sewn.
And so easy way to do that, I just take my 2 pieces and take my ruler and lay a 1/4 inch on my seam allowance, or on my seam that I just sewn, and check and make sure I'm a 1/4 inch all the way through. And this one did, at the very end, it did drop a little bit, so it is a little bit bigger down here.
But just something to think about, something to check, because when people bring in their quilt squares, sometimes full quilts, and that they say it's not lining up, can you look at this and figure out what I'm doing wrong? 99% of the time it's the 1/4 inch.
Yes. Yep. And before, I mean, when, you know, before I worked here and before I had done a lot of quilting, I'm like, why doesn't it ever work right? You know?
Yeah.
Well, then once you start breaking it down, you go back to your seam, you're like, oh.
Yep.
Well, if my seams are consistent, then my pieces all line up.
Yep. So back to our very first Saturdays in Stitches about cutting. Very important. If you have your cutting correctly done, then your next important step is that 1/4 inch seam. If your cutting is correct, your 1/4 inch seam is correct, everything is going to line up and go together perfectly, and you should have no issues. Although we will give you tips and tricks later on to help those seams go together nicely.
When they don't want to.
When they don't want to, yes. And if you have a big area you're trying to put together with a lot of seams, you know, just how to pin, where to glue, these type of things we will go over with you. But it's very, very important that you start right from the beginning. So if you haven't saw the cutting video, I definitely recommend you go back to that and just look at the cutting video. And then make sure that your 1/4 seam is correct. The other thing I want to touch base on, which is so important for your 1/4 inch seam as well, Erin talked about the fact that we use the 50 weight Aurifil thread when we do our piecing. The reason that we use the 50 weight thread is because it nests right in. When you press your seam, it'll sink right in your fabric because of the weight. And then when you flip over and you are pressing out your block, whatever you've just pieced, it's going to sink in nicely and it's going to lay flat. If you're using a heavier weight thread, it's going to cause bulk in your seams. And when you press it open, there's going to be bulk there as well. And you may think, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And if you're sitting there saying that to yourself right now, that girl's nuts. That's not that big of a deal. I challenge you, just do it. Use a 28 weight. Use even a 40 weight. Look at what your seam does when you press over. Look at your piece, your seam, and then use a 50 weight. And look at how your piece lays so nice and flat and how that thread sinks in. So if you don't want to take my word for it, absolutely, you know, try it for yourself and you will see it is amazing the difference. But when you're talking about a really large quilt and you have a lot of pieces in there,
Yeah.
those little details will add up across that entire quilt. And then when you're all done and you have wonkiness or it's off in places, if you're looking for that perfection, these are the places that you want to start.
Yep, absolutely. It'd actually probably be a good visual if we did a 1/4 inch seam with all different types of weight of threads.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
That would be a good visual.
Absolutely. I hear it a lot. I do hear it a lot.
Yes.
Yes. I had no idea until I started using Aurifil thread. I had no idea until, what weight of thread am I using?
Does it matter what weight I'm using?
Yes. Yeah, I know, right? Those are the things we hear. So those are the things that we want to pass along to you. Those are the things that we've done as well, because we've both been beginners before.
Yeah.
So
And just like with the needles, I love talking about needles because there's so many different ones. But I do hear that on a regular basis. Like, what? There's different sizes. There's different... yes, there is. So the smaller the needle size 11, smaller the needle, you know, you go up if you need if you're doing a thicker project, a bigger needle, 14, 16. But for piecing today, we were talking about 11 and 12s, and there are many different shapes and sizes.
We're going to open you up to a whole new world of thread and needles, but we didn't want to overwhelm to begin with. So.
Insert the Aladdin song, Whole New World, now.
Absolutely. So I think that covered everything, did it?
I think so. And so we will be back in 2025.
Oh, yes.
And ready to talk more about sewing and quilting and all the good stuff.
Yep. So, in the meantime, happy stitching.
Happy stitching.